On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, more controversy around who will start with the latest workout video. We'll break it all down in today's show.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and beat writer for SI Thunder, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LO ThunderPod. On today's show, brought to you by FanDuel, we're joined by Joel Lorenzi of the Oklahoman, the Thunder beat writer for the Oklahoman newspaper. Joel, how are you doing today?
I'm good, dog. How are you?
I'm good. Excited to be back talking hoops with you. We're almost to the start of the season, getting to talk to Sam in a week, getting media day the week after that, getting training camp in the preseason. And before you know it, we'll be down in San Antonio, Joel. What a time that will be to go on the river walk with you late at night. Joel, today there was some controversy, believe it or not, in the basketball world. And it was not
Isn't there always?
It was not just 2K leaking the City Cup floors. It was not just new uniforms getting leaked. It was real juicy stuff in Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
Isaiah Hartenstein has a workout video. And Thunder fans listening to this are feeling some things, Joel. Initially, did you have any reaction to just the video? And do you have any takes on what these videos we see every summer even mean?
Well, I thought he moved well, but all these guys do. I mean, I thought I saw, I don't know who I thought I saw guarding him in that video. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, these runs are – I respect some of these runs. I respect a lot of these runs, actually. But that run, I could hardly recognize anybody. Not that that matters. I mean, he's getting his workout in. But that just goes to say that these things are often overblown. I mean, people – the floor of, all-time off-season workouts in terms of them being like a mirage, like fooling everybody is the Mitchell Robinson where he's like isoing everybody in the gym. That's what I think of when I think of off-season workouts, and then everybody knows like Hoodie Mellow and stuff like that. So obviously off-season workouts you take them with a grain of salt. I think this one you should especially take with a grain of salt. But I think it's fair to assume that he'll move well. I mean he's a starting caliber center in the league. I think people know that. I think the one thing people should be wary of is, believing in the jump shot because they saw it in the off-season workout video. I mean, it could look smooth, it could look quicker than you thought. But we're not looking at NBA wingspans guarding him or the contests or the schemes, none of that. I mean, you never know what happens in an NBA game. So that's all I'll say. I thought it was a fine on the big scale of off-season workouts. On one end being Mitchell Robinson, on the other end being I don't know, like Chet and the KD runs. Like I thought Isaiah Hartenstein's video was like somewhere closer to the middle.
Yeah, I just think that most of the time these workout videos aren't indicative of much. You can go back and pull out a laundry list from Ben Simmons all the way to Darius Baisley, who put out these fantastic summer workouts. And then in the end, you revert back to the data that we have. Like we have a pretty good collection of these guys most of the time in their NBA careers to that point of the video. And not much changes once October rolls back around. However, what's so interesting about Hartenstein is the door was left open by the way that the organization talked about him at his introductory press conference, where not only did they sign him to the massive price tag, which we're going to get into, but Sam and Isaiah both talked about how the Thunder believe in this guy who's only 26 and has a lot more room to grow. They teased, shooting threes more. And so if you're clinging to those words, I can see where these workout videos really are making an impact on you of what you think that this can look like. But in the end, obviously, it's not going to mean as much in like 3 weeks. Like in 3 weeks, we'll have things to react to that actually do mean a lot more than these workout videos do. Perhaps the most interesting part of these videos was the comment section for a lot of different reasons. Firstly, Isaiah's trainer put on Instagram that the plan, someone commented, put him at the 5 next to Chet, and his trainer commented that's the plan. That was the whole comment. Uh, that sparked a fire across NBA social media, and then he backtracked later and said that that was taken out of context. There wasn't much context, so it's hard to justify taken out of context, but sure, we can go with that. He mentioned how they have not discussed that at all between him, the team, Isaiah, whatever. So we're back to square one of not necessarily knowing where the Thunder lean on this topic. And there's a lot of different branches that you can pull from this topic. So, first and foremost, what would be the pros of starting Isaiah Hartenstein next to Chet?
In fairness to the trainer, let me just say this. In fairness to the trainer, the entire comment was slide Chet to the 4, ... Boy's going to be tough. And then he says that's the plan. And that's where he kind of has room to backtrack if that wasn't his intention. If he really was replying to the second part of the comment, we'll never know. But there was room to kind of wiggle out of that and that to be misconstrued. So maybe he was never insinuating that all along. We would never know. Now, the pros of Hartenstein starting are, which will definitely happen. Like regardless, he'll start, I imagine, a ton of games just off matchup alone, but for sample reasons too, like for sample size reasons as well. Both of those probably just merge and serve the same purpose more than often. But you get to see Chet at the 4 for sample purposes. How he moves alongside another genuine big. How he looks as maybe coming off range as a shooter, as a ball handler in a pick and roll and some invert stuff because everybody's smaller than him. You get to see a lot from Chet, but with Hartenstein specifically, you open up some stuff in terms of downhill lanes, and you open up certain actions. Like they could never really do true DHOs last year, I thought, except when like Jay Will was in the game, which is it's fun. It's a fun wrinkle with Jay Will, but Hartenstein is easily the best screener on his team right now from day one. And so you're gonna see guys like Isaiah Joe should earn every dollar of that contract playing next to Hartenstein. Like you'll see some movement shooting that you probably didn't see last year. You'll see some room created on the perimeter off those actions. You'll see guys get downhill in ways that they maybe couldn't last year. Like you'll see more ways to get out of the jam. I think there's more wrinkles being added with Hartenstein for sure.
So my pro for starting them together, not to reiterate what you said, because I do agree with what you said, but also turning Chet into like a Jaren Jackson Jr. If your big concern is who's going to play the 4 for the Thunder, what does the 4 spot look like? Well, if you put Chet next to Hartenstein, I feel pretty confident that like he will be a souped up version of Jaren Jackson Jr., who's an all-star, really good player. And I just think that can add a different element as well, where you have him being able to roam defensively and use all of his prowess while Isaiah Hartenstein protects the rim, and vice versa. Of course, Chet will also protect the rim, as you see how many blocks that Jaren Jackson Jr. racks up, even without scorekeeper gate that we had a couple of years ago down in Memphis. So the pros is a lot defensively, but there are some offensively, like you highlighted. It's just, to me, not outweighing the cons, which we're going to get into coming up. But first, I want to say right now about our good friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is fantastic, and I think that what FanDuel is able to do is give you a unique opportunity to go check out America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel is great because you've heard us talk about them before, but now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get 3 weeks free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need to do is have a Google account, a current form of payment that you can cancel anytime. Go to FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. It is football season. It's in full swing. But perhaps, Joel, all you want to bet on is basketball. You can bet on hoops right now as well. Not only for the Thunder to win the NBA title, where they have the second best odds, but also opening night lines are already out, where the Thunder are 2.5-point underdogs in Denver. You can go check that out at FanDuel. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast and the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you talking Thunder basketball, joined by Joel Lorenzi of the Oklahoman Thunder beat writer at JX Lorenzi on Twitter. Go check out Locked On Sooners, Locked On Pokes. Huge matchups on Saturday for each school. And also check out Locked On NBA for the national perspective of the league. But right now, we're still talking Hartenstein. We're still talking Chet, who will enter that starting five. Joel, my big con for why I don't think that Hartenstein should start, as every projection since the offseason has concluded, I've had Caruso in that five instead of Giddey, and then the rest stay the same. I just think that the whole value of adding Hartenstein is to ensure that you're able to blanket 48 minutes of the game in rim protection. And you have to get more creative to do that if you play them together for bulk minutes. And I just think that you see a lot of different avenues unfold if you're not starting Caruso as well, where it's like, yeah, it sounds great to have, Dort into Caruso, into Wallace, into these defenders, but also there's a value in this new modern league to have as many high-end elite perimeter defenders out there as possible, especially when you have Chet Holmgren at the rim. And a lot of people are concerned about what this team will look like now that they don't have Giddey on what was already a very successful team. What made them so successful was playing that style where only Chet is your big man and everybody's a playmaker, everybody can run the floor. And now you've just swapped out Giddey for a guy who fits that style so much better. And I just think that you should not fix what's not broken yet and kind of roll with that because of all the different avenues it can give you. But there's not very many cons to starting Hartenstein, and that's what makes this such a tough decision.
No, you're right. I won't repeat everything you said. I will say, though, like I said before, like he'll start playing games, I imagine, based on matchup alone. And like obviously, like you said, the four playmakers, four ball handlers with Chet at the five, doing everything he could do as an anchor is the obvious template. I think regardless, that's probably the closing lineup. I'm not sure. I think it would take like a miraculous sample from Hartenstein to kind of change that because that is a killer, like especially now that that's Caruso, like that's a killer closing lineup. I think that still is probably the default closing lineup. But I'll flip this thing to talk about offense. Like with Hartenstein, the cons and why he's probably meant for the bench in that second unit more often than not is that, I think, again, as a screener, if Dub is leading those second units, I think Dub more than anything in the second round could have used a great screener. When you're constantly doing guard to guard, like playing a team like the way Dallas played that series, when you're constantly doing guard to guard and you're doing like ghost screens, you're relying on a defense to kind of mess up and miscommunicate. Like if a defense is on point, you're really not seeing any advantages there. And I thought a great screen here and there, like a real brutal Viking-like screen, could have got him some downhill stuff, which is all Dub ever really needs. I mean, you get Dub going downhill, then he gets to the elbow, then he gets to the rim. Like, that's where you like to see Dub. And so I think that pairing itself in that second unit, there's a big sample you probably want to see with that. And then, like, if people do want to see like some, I don't know how much he'll be shooting threes, right? But if people are curious about Hartenstein, the three-point shooter, if the Thunder is curious about Hartenstein, the three-point shooter, in real NBA settings, and if they could turn him around, if Chip Engley could work his magic, that's probably the unit you want him to be shooting those. I mean, where is he going to have room to shoot those in the first unit? I mean, all those guys are going to be pulling. Obviously, you don't want to take threes from Chet, from Dub, probably from Caruso, from Dort. Like you don't want to take threes from those guys. And Shea's looking like he could be more comfortable from three off the dribble. You don't want to take threes from any of those guys. There's not really anybody you want to take threes from in the second unit either, but it's more viable than the first unit, right? Like, and then obviously the other actions like dribble handoff. Like I think like Isaiah Joe stands to benefit more than a lot of these guys from playing alongside Hartenstein. That's another benefit of the second unit. There's just more user for him, I think. And it's like you said with the defense, like if you're not trying to use him to blanket those 48 minutes, then are you like trying to force Jay Will minutes? Like, are you trying to see a mysterious other person at center this year? Are we trying to see Kenrich minutes? Like, what are they trying to fill those minutes with if they're not trying to blanket that entire 48?
Yeah, I mean they're going to play small some this year as they've done in the past, but I think it boils down to the simplest way to put it is what they did so great last year was with Chet the 5, and that's a formula that's tried and true and proven, and I think gets heightened by swapping out Giddey for Caruso. If that becomes reality, if that really does happen, then what is Isaiah Hartenstein? He is the best backup center in the league for a multitude of reasons. Everything that J. Will did well, sans shooting, of course, J. Will's a much better proven shooter than Hartenstein is right now. Sans shooting, everything he did well, Hartenstein does tenfold and then some. Like you mentioned, this ability to help J-Dub as a screener, that's a massive one. As a playmaker and passer, that's a massive one. A more reliable rolling option. Like J. Will really improved last year, and I think that J. Will's continuing to get better. But Hartenstein just says everything times 10, and you weren't that far away last year. Like last year, the recipe wasn't a disaster. The recipe wasn't even wrong. What was wrong is, you whenever Chet left the floor, you lost by 20 in those minutes. Like it was not a good thing. Your backup center was not good enough to win, and that's a blunt way to say it, that the Thunder needed to upgrade to their backup center position, but they did, and they've done that with Isaiah Hartenstein, and that's the difference in going further in the playoffs, while you can also mix and match. Just like, the Thunder were able to mix and match and get 2% of Chet and J. Will's minutes together. That's going to obviously increase with Hartenstein. But, you can mix and match it later on. Does not have to be the first 5, out there. And I think that it'll also be matchup dependent and everything else. But it just seems so simple when you lay it out like that, that I don't know, what the explanation would be the other way, other than what we talked about in the first segment of just like making Chet this incredible 4. But the way that they've talked about Chet this entire time has not been that of a 4. And I don't know that they'll pivot from that just because they've added and filled their biggest flaw from a year ago. And that's where I think that national people are having a hard time talking about this subject, is because they look at the price tag and they just think that, oh, he's got to start because you've paid him $30 million a year. He's got to start now. And we're going to tell you why that's not true, all coming up. We're back on the Lockdown Thunder podcast, on the Lockdown Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you talking Thunder basketball. Follow Joel Lorenzi on Twitter at JXLorenzi. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Styles. And check out Lockdown NBA for the national show. Joel, part of the discourse this afternoon was about, well, the Thunder are paying him so much money. They're paying him a lot, Joel. How can you make that a bench guy? And I think that the answer is pretty simple. They had to use that money or they would lose it. And there is a tax to get a guy to sign with the smallest market in the NBA. And what's the difference? If you think his value is $20, $20 million, and he's getting paid 30, I'll gladly pay the $10 million upcharge to get the very best backup center in the NBA whenever that is your only flaw from a year ago.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's especially like you mentioned. I mean, you took him from a winning situation in a really lovable city. Not to say OKC's not. I've enjoyed my time here, but New York is New York, and so obviously there is a upcharge to pull somebody to, OKC. And so yeah, as much as we talk about like Sam and the Thunder thinking unconventionally, I don't know why it's so hard for people. I don't know why that's such a crazy idea. Because I mean, I guess their thing is like, I guess we don't even realize that they're thinking differently until we have these discussions, and we're like, okay, well, this is such a polarizing thing. Like this is the Thunder's brain. This is how they think. But I just don't. I don't understand why this thing has drawn so much discourse. I mean, people are so fixed on like the historical data that says, well, you pay somebody this much, it's because you have intentions for them to start. But why couldn't this be one of those times where OKC is just thinking differently? I mean, all the signs point to that, do they not?
The signs do point to that, and they're not hidden. They're in plain sight of one, they had to use the money or they were not going to be able to have this luxury anymore. Number two, it does not hinder them from doing anything in the future. They can still go make plenty of trades to improve this roster. They can still go re-sign every single young player on this roster. And number three, it's a 3-year contract with some non-guarantees in there to where if this somehow is just off the rails bad, it's not going to be something you look back on like Timothy Mozgov or another big contract. Like this is just the perfect contract and one that the Thunder have clearly, talked to Isaiah Hartenstein about, hey, we do things unconventionally here. We run 12 guys a night compared to your last coach. We fluctuate, the starting lineup typically. Last year, they had a very steady 5, obviously, but typically fluctuating the starting lineup. And Hartenstein said as much of like nothing was promised and nothing was promised in that sense at his introductory press conference. I don't think that that's changed entering media day, but we'll see. So I just don't understand where the disconnect is, because it's not as though we're saying that they're never going to play together, and we're not even saying that they're never going to start together. But it does. But what all I'm saying is from this whole conversation is it does not have to be Hartenstein and Chet together in the starting 5, or else there's some discontentment. It doesn't have to be that. The check's still clear, no matter if he plays 30 minutes a night or 0 minutes a night. The check's clear. That part's all good. And now you're just a player again. Like you don't have to attach that dollar figure. And it comes back to what we said last segment. What if you think that the Thunder spent a ton of money, like an ungodly amount of money? Okay. What would you have spent if you're in New York to have him as your backup center? $20 million? Okay, the Thunder paid $10 million more to get him to a small market away from New York, which would have been better for his family as his wife's a model. They were able to fill their biggest weakness, which literally ended their season a year ago. And they're able to not only fill that weakness, but fill it with the very best option that will be available or was available at the time. What are we talking about? Like, what are we talking about? Over $10 million. That does not hurt you in the future of retaining your guys. This is the smartest contract you could have done with this money, and people are treating it as though it's some albatross.
Yeah. And it's probably especially strange considering the context of the rest of their books. I mean, Shea's on the most team-friendly contract of any superstar. Obviously, the younger stars like Chet and Dub, you don't got to worry about those guys for some time. It's strange to be arguing about this, but I do think like for all the people that are like picking a side in this, like they're both going to end up right. I can't wait for the first week of the season when like Caruso starts against like the Bulls and Hartenstein like starts against Denver or something like it. They're going to fluctuate so much, probably not probably. I imagine a lot more than last year, to the point where they'll get the data they need and they'll please anybody who has a side in this. And it'll be fine. I don't think they'll be hurt either way because I mean, we know how little that starting unit means in the grand scheme of things. Not nearly as much as that closing unit, and all of this is really just sampling for the playoffs, which is what these guys are focused on now. So,
and I think that puts a perfect bow on the conversation of all coaches. Mark especially does not care who starts. Doesn't care. He's willing to yank guys after 2 minutes. He's willing to play 12 guys a night. Like, it is beyond irrelevant who is starting. What matters is who's closing. What matters is how quickly you adjust. And that's the luxury of this Thunder team. The luxury is they don't have to start any type of way, out of loyalty, out of respect, out of price tag. Nothing. They're not had by the toenails with any direction. They can just simply make these decisions based upon the matchups at hand each night and based upon what's being most effective from night to night, which is how they've made decisions this entire time under Mark. So to me, it doesn't matter. I just would really strongly push back on the fact that they have to start him because of this contract. That is the furthest thing from the truth. With that being said, let's stop dancing around it. Joel, who is the starting five? Who starts the most games? If this team is fully healthy, what starting five starts the most games for the Thunder this season?
Yeah, I think it's the one with Caruso in it instead of Hartenstein. I think that's just going to be their default lineup. And maybe, no, I can't say that because I think, I was thinking about this today. I think in a playoff series against Dallas again, I could see Hartenstein starting like half those games just off the idea, like, obviously they're going to, Dallas couldn't guard the same way they did in another series just because, like, off Giddey alone being absent. But also, like, if they still wanted to be, if they still wanted to have Gafford, like, super low, like, DHOs are going to have to pull him higher. Like, you want to bring those guys as high up the floor as possible. So I could see Hartenstein starting in half the games in that series too. But I say all that to say I think Caruso remains the default starter, and I'd be more confident to say I think he's the default closer, but that's also situational too now, I think, because they have that much versatility.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they're closing some games with Dort on the bench if needed, and it's like Shea, Caruso, Dub, Chet, Hartenstein, something like that. Like, I think that the closing lineup is all bets are off, whatever they need in any situation. If it's a situation where, like, hey, we're up by 4, we need stops, you can just go all defensive and just be an insanely good defensive roster and lineup with Dort and Caruso there, and you can get funky. But if you need offense, you can pivot that way too. So there's just so much ability. I also think that the starting five we will look back on the season and say that the starting five was Caruso alongside Shea, Dub, Dort, and Chet. Now, Joel, the other piece of drama this week, Woj. Pour one out for Woj. He's gone. St. Bonaventure's. He's going to be rooting on the Bonnies as the GM, getting them right, getting them in the tournament, hopefully. So congratulations to Woj on retirement. But, Joel, where does that leave the industry? Like the media landscape, news break, where does that leave anything? Well, what happened?
Yeah, it's shaking up. By the way, the worst part maybe in my world about Woj leaving that job to go be the GM at St. Bonnie's is that now he's no longer objective. He's the same Bonnie's guy. Maybe he even has his NBA teams now. Who knows what his NBA teams are? We might never find out. But no, the business is shaking up. I mean, that dude was a megastar because he changed the way the league was covered. I mean, beat writers really don't even break news like that anymore because him and Shams kind of turned that into like a monopoly. And I won't forget Chris Haynes. Chris Haynes is somewhere in there too. Mark Stein gets his scoops. Like, scoops are not impossible these days, but those guys, like, they turn that in, they monopolize that. And so Woj is a megastar in this. He leaves a gaping hole in the industry. It's going to be really hard to replace him over there. But like, generally, I was always impressed with Woj. I mean, he had the most impossible job in sports media, maybe, just in terms of how demanding it is, the amount of relationships you have to upkeep, how much you're glued to your phone, and everything I've heard about him. I never really had any interaction with Woj. He seems like a good dude, but from everything I've heard about him, it seems like he was pretty tapped in with his family, which feels like an impossible thing to do when you're in that job. So salute to Woj. I mean, he's a legend. I can literally, I mean, this is the only person where I can remember where I was with certain tweets of his. Like, he just became that big. So
yeah, I can remember where I was with many Woj tweets of like Woj was this vessel to learn what's happening in the best league in the world. So it was a lot of fun. But have fun, Woj, being like able to just go full Bonnies. And he was able to do that on Twitter this last year. So maybe we should have seen it coming with his Bonnies. But have fun as GM of the Bonnies. But we'll be objective. We'll hold it down on that end, Joel, won't we?
we try. I don't think people understand our roles now that we're talking about it. I think people, they see the pod is called Locked On Thunder, and they think everybody who comes on here is supposed to be a Thunder fan. I don't think people understand. I mean, you're from Oklahoma. So like at least people can like maybe connect the dots and be like, oh well, they can make their assumptions. I'm from Chicago. I'm not even a Bulls fan. I didn't even grow up a Bulls fan. I'm literally a reporter stationed here. The Thunder had no immediate relevance to my life until I got this job. And now my job is to be around the team and report. So when people are like, oh, I seen some comment on one of the pods we did where they were like, "Oh, he doesn't sound like a real fan." Well, I'm not. I'm sorry to say, I'm a objective as they come. But I'm a basketball appreciator. I can appreciate this Thunder team. I can appreciate a lot of teams in this league. This is the best basketball we've ever seen. So it's just a fun time to be around, Rylan. I think.
Yeah, I think that that's the thing of like all I think is responsible in this job is to be fair. Of you don't need to root for anyone and like hope that they're going to do amazing things. Just be fair to them. And for the Thunder, they've been doing amazing things. So you're going to say that
Yeah.
they're doing amazing things, and it will sound like you're being a fan, but you're being fair to what they've done, what they're doing. They're building something so amazingly special. But whenever anything of the opposite happens, you'll talk about that as well, and that's just going to be what comes with the territory. I think that I think that everybody in this industry has a little bit of a different role. Of like, there's fans creating like there's genuine fans like who are just doing this as a hobby to be a
Mhm.
fan, which is awesome. There are people like that. There are people like you at a more like independent, more secure place. There's people in the digital space like Locked On Thunder. Like, it's no secret that when the Thunder win, you want to listen to Locked On Thunder more. And the numbers have bear that out since the time I started here. Like, when the Thunder win games, you guys want to listen. And so, yes, it is very advantageous for me if the Thunder win. But it's also very advantageous for me to be true to the audience, true to you, and be just fair and unbiased as possible of just saying what's happening, whether it's good. And for the Thunder, the last couple of seasons, it's all been good. That's just the way the cookies crumble. We would not be saying this kind of stuff if we were in Detroit right now, hosting Locked On Pistons. Shout out to Koo. But like, it's just comes with the territory, and that's where the lines get blurred a little bit. And you can't really blame people for not understanding that Joel Lorenzi grew up a bandwagon Laker fan. So,
Bandwagon. Hey, that's what we're not gonna do because I was the biggest Kobe guy growing up. That's one thing. I was still a fan when they had Robert Sacre, man. We can't do that, bro. Loyalty runs through me, bro. Everybody can't say that. Everybody can't say that. I at least appreciated the D Rose Bulls. I didn't want to. I thought people when people started watching the Bulls again just because they had the D Rose crew, I thought that was bandwagoning. I thought that was crazy that people were so fair weather in Chicago. They jumped on the bandwagon as soon as the Bulls got good again, and they were right back on again when D Rose departed. That's one thing they could never say about me, Rylan. So when you're there, when you're looking at my tombstone, when I'm long gone, I hope it says was loyal to the end, starting with Robert Sacre. I hope Robert Sacre is on my
from
tombstone.
from Robert Sacre all the way to Rylan Stiles, you've been loyal to the very end, Joel Lorenzi.
Facts. It's a
And
bar.
I've been loyal to Jerry Stackhouse and Joel Lorenzi. So it's
Oh,
been
brother.
Brandon Bass, Jerry Stackhouse, Dirk, Josh Howard, Joel. Remember Josh Howard?
Yes,
Fun
of course.
times,
Why
fun
wouldn't I?
times. He's a high flyer. He was a high flyer, son, let me tell you. But we'll talk about Josh Howard off the pod. Thank you all for listening. Until next time, which includes next week with Joel Lorenzi. Be good and be good to one.